Recent Michigan consumer sentiment for August, we're looking at 55.2, which is, I mean, that tells you that half of the country is barely even somewhat positive about where we're going. Mike Lee, real quick here. The other thing about this poll I found interesting, 61% say they are so steamed they'd be willing to pick up a protest sign and march around the country. 61% of Americans are so fed up and frustrated they want to pick up a sign and go march in the streets.
My big takeaway from this poll is in response to a lot of the other polls saying that the midterms are somewhat tightening. There's historically been a response bias in the summer, meaning Republicans don't respond to polls during the summer months. So a month from now, when we see the generic congressional ballot move from D+1 or R+1 to R+4 or 5, and some of these Senate races where Dr. Oz is supposedly down 15 points and Herschel Walker's losing by massive margins, those aren't widening out. What you're going to actually see is the reality of the numbers. And when you have a wrong track at the highest levels it's ever been at, how are Democrats going to win in close races? So you look specifically at Arizona, where Joe Biden's approval rating is somewhere in the mid to low 30s. How on earth can Mark Kelly hold on to his seat? And I think a lot of political pundits out there are deluding themselves from reality that with poll numbers this low, to think that the Democrats can hold on to the Senate or not face a massive wave in the House is very much delusional.
Well, and we'll see how involved Mitch McConnell gets with these Senate races come November. We're going to talk about that later in the show. We are just getting started this morning. Coming up, more migrants, Donald Trump, like a lot. So this is a Trump story, pretty much.
Well, again, this is the acceptance of the left. So they'll accept anything and everything that doesn't disagree with them. But in terms of college kids, you know, there goes the old saying, if you're 18 and you're conservative, you don't have a heart. If you're 40 and you're liberal, you don't have a brain. That was a term or a phrase coined by the great Winston Churchill. So it's surprising it's so polarized and college kids are so active and feel so strongly emotional about these issues. When I was in college, I mean, until I really started working and almost working full time my junior and senior year in New York City, I wasn't very active. And I remember trying to have conversations with other students who were wholly unaware of what was going on. So I wouldn't read too much into this. I mean, most college students are liberal until they graduate, get their first paycheck, see how much the government takes out, and get off their parents' payroll.
You see what your tax bill is. Exactly. Till you see what you're paying in taxes and how they mismanage their money. That is very true. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but coming up, Bitcoin tumbles below 20,000. We've got a big week of housing data coming out. I do want to get to that because speaking of a crummy economy and where we might be headed in the fall, look at this. New home sales are out tomorrow. You've got pending home sales out on Wednesday, but we saw home sales last week. Actually, that number fell. So we're seeing pressure, and a lot of contracts are actually not even being signed now in housing. What does that tell you?
Yeah, well, a couple of factors coming in here. I think this is one of the cases where the Fed has actually gotten something right. The housing market was simply too hot for much of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. And so with these rate hikes, 30-year fix is going to run you right and around 5.5% today. That's up from sub 3% a year ago. So that's a dramatic cost of capital for those going out there to buy a house. And then in addition to that, the average home price is up about 15% year over year. So we've seen a dramatic slowing in home prices over the last year. And so the pending home sales last month actually dropped 20% year over year. I don't know if we'll see that dramatic of a drop off now, but we are seeing a big fall off in the housing market. And so one of the solutions for higher prices and inflation is higher prices. You're clearly seeing that in new home sales and the new home constructions, and we're getting to a level where we were pre-COVID, which is a much more sustainable level. But what does that mean in terms of the knock-on for the economy? The housing market has a tremendous multiplier effect in terms of labor and materials, and also wealth building for people going in and buying their homes. So we haven't seen a dramatic price correction. I don't know that one is coming. I mean, maybe some people are giving back portions of gains in very large markets, but this housing market is nothing like we were pre-financial crisis and post-financial crisis. The leverage in the system simply does not exist. But I would say, this is going to have a very negative short-term impact on the consumer. But over the long run, this is one of, I believe, the good things the Fed has done is slow down a housing market that was simply way too hot to be sustainable.
Yeah, well, actually, deep tease here. That's what we call it in democracy at its best with this one.
Yeah, these people, when they talk about climate change, they're total and complete frauds, like almost everything else. John Kerry, it just brings me back to when he ran for president and he didn't know the name of Pedro Martinez, who was the star pitcher of the Boston Red Sox, and he's supposed to be this Boston guy. And he called him Manny Martinez instead of Manny Ramirez and Pedro Martinez. The guy is a total and complete fraud, and this is your climate czar. It's a perfect metaphor for the entire nonsense movement.
Yeah, but Dagan, they never get called out on it. That's readership, viewers. I mean, they vote with their feet and their eyeballs, and they're going to turn off if they realize that something is disingenuous. Again, go back to the New York Times.
According to polling from Pew, Rasmussen, and the Public Polling Project, the single most closed-minded and misinformed group of the population are rich white liberals. Who is the target audience of the New York Times? It's your rich white liberal. So the New York Times is not a newspaper, it's a narrative shaper and an echo chamber for this segment of the population. And as more and more people are opening their eyes, particularly post-COVID, with all, the CDC coming out saying, we've got to rework everything that we've done now. And so much they've gotten wrong over the last decade. And again, it's nothing new. They covered up the Holocaust. I'm like, this has been their MO forever. And more people are waking up, and now they need a right-wing watch reporter. I mean, give me a break.
No, that's a great...
Cheryl?
Go ahead, yeah. And it's time for the big buzz of the morning, a proposal that'll knock you off your feet. Check this out. This man decided to propose to his girlfriend after completing an Ironman in Estonia. He gets down on one knee with the ring in hand, but then he falls because he's in pain. Those around him come to his rescue, massaging his leg until he could propose again from the ground. Not to ruin a good story here, but she said yes, Mike. She did say yes. But can you believe that this guy, to do an Ironman and then propose? That's a lot in one day, I'm thinking.
I just wonder, is he collapsing from exhaustion after the Ironman, or is his body telling his head that maybe it's not a good idea to get married? I mean, I'm just throwing that out.
Oh, Mike, come on. Way to take the romance right out of it. I love this. I mean, look, I do a lot of these races, Liz, as you know, and I can't even think straight or talk at the end of a race, and he's proposing. I mean, I don't know. Hats off to him. I think it's kind of cool.
Well, I think, look, it's all about perseverance, whether it's the Ironman contest or proposing. And Mike, shame on you. That's the most unromantic thing I ever heard in my life. This may have been a terrible idea, but he meant well.
Mike, final word.
Well,
maybe.
My 12-year anniversary is coming up this weekend. And so I think Liz is 100% right. Whether it's Ironman or marathons or proposing or marriage, it's perseverance.
I'm still the helpless romantic of the group, I think. Maybe, Liz, you're with me. Real quick before I let you guys go, Mike, I got to ask you real quick. We're going to hear again from Jerome Powell on Friday. This might be the biggest market-moving news we get this week. Final take.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what he has to say. The whole market's going to watch him. The bond market is saying we are going to get a pivot at some point next year. And as Jim Iorio stated earlier today, I tend to agree with the bond market over what comes out of his mouth. But he could definitely rock markets with just a couple of comments that get taken out of context.
Yeah, and Liz, real quick, midterms coming up November. That's another market mover.
We're going to have a red wave. Cheryl, don't believe all the negative commentary right now. They're trying to dumb down fundraising and turnout and everything else.
Yeah.
We're going to have a red wave.
Yeah. All right, Liz, Mike, guys, thank you so much. Varney and Company up right now. Happy Monday, Stuart.
Yeah, that Mike Lee right there, he could be a bit more romantic, I would say. But that's just me. That's just me, okay? See you soon, Mike. And good morning, Cheryl.